Hey everyone, welcome to my second video on using the Skeleton app as a starting point for your own Flipper Zero applications. I recommend you first watch my previous video as it walks through the project in detail. In this video, we're going to start with the Skeleton app and then morph it into another application for the Flipper Zero. Our new application is about setting the RGB light on the Flipper Zero. Let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is rename the Skeleton app, and we're going to call it RGB_Flipper. Next, we'll change the app ID to RGB_Flipper_app, and then we'll change the name to Work in Progress RGB Flipper app, and then we'll change our entry point to main RGB Flipper app. And then in the category, instead of GPIO, we're not using really GPIO, so we'll just change it to utilities. And then in the description, we'll switch it to demo application. Next, we'll grab that entry point, main RGB Flipper app, and we'll switch over to our app.c, and we'll change its entry point to be the same name, main RGB Flipper app. And then finally, we want to take the app ID, RGB Flipper app, and we'll go into the top of our file and change our #include for our icons to be RGB Flipper app icons. We'll do Control-Shift-B and then launch app on Flipper just to make sure everything is still building and working fine. That looks good, so we'll go on to the next step. With App.C open, we'll go to Edit Replace. We'll search for Skeleton with a capital S, and we'll replace it with RGB Flipper. Go ahead and replace all those instances. And now we'll update it to lowercase skeleton and lowercase RGB_Flipper. And then we should probably put underscores at the end of skeleton and RGB Flipper. We'll go ahead and replace all of those. Looks good. Next, we'll go ahead and replace game, capital G, with glow, capital G. And then we'll replace lowercase game with lowercase glow. And then we'll scroll down to our application menu and we'll replace play with glow. Control-Shift-B and launch app on Flipper. Make sure everything's working. Looks good. This is totally optional, but next we're going to just remove the backlight code. We could just comment out this line, but instead I'm going to go ahead and delete the define. And then we'll go remove this if-def code. And then down on line 453, we'll remove this if-def code as well. For our application, we only have to redraw the screen when our data changes. So we'll go ahead and remove this RedrawScreen code. So let's go see where that's used. Okay, so that redraw is in this timer. So we can go ahead and remove the timer. And then we can replace our enter callback with just an unused context here for now. Our exit callback can also just be unused context. And then we can scroll up to the RedrawScreen case and we can remove this case from our code. And then we can remove the timer from our Flipper app since we no longer need the timer. And then finally, we can remove this RedrawScreen ID, and we no longer need to set this to 42. We'll just set it to the default value. And then let's go ahead and search for timer. And it looks like 2 of our details comments are wrong, so we'll go ahead and just fix those. Copy the brief into the details. And then we'll do Control-Shift-B and launch app on Flipper. Make sure everything's okay. Next, we'll remove setting 2 and its buffer. So we'll remove these 3 lines. And we can remove the name. Then we'll scroll down and we'll remove all of the setting 2 stuff here. The item clicked code we can remove as well because setting 2 was doing that prompt to ask for your name. And then we can remove displaying the name. And then we'll scroll down to our alloc method and we can remove that buffer. And then we can remove the setting 2 entries here. Let's go ahead and remove those. And then we can remove the model assignment for setting 2. And then in our free, we'll remove that buffer. And then we can also remove this view. So we'll jump to the top of the file and make sure we remove that view everywhere. So that text input view. We have this enum with text input. We don't have that anymore. And then here in our alloc, we allocated the text input. We don't need to do that anymore. And I think that looks good. So Control-Shift-B, launch app on Flipper, make sure everything's okay. It looks like we have an error on this RGB Flipper navigation configure callback. Let's go ahead and look at that. Okay, yeah, we no longer need this callback since we removed the text input. Control-Shift-B and launch app on Flipper. And this time it looks like everything compiled fine and our config only has the one option. So now we're ready to start adding features to our application. So we're going to change this first setting to be setting initial color. And then we'll go ahead and change these color values to be a 32. And then we'll say initial color names. We'll add a couple more colors here. We'll add cyan and white. And then we'll also add off. So let's put the hex. So off is all zeros. Red is FF0000. And hex for the remaining colors. And then we'll change our setting ones to setting initial color everywhere. And then we'll update our model as well, changing that from setting one index to setting initial color index. Then we'll change our label from team color to initial color. And then we'll go ahead and update our draw callback to use color instead of team. And then we'll say initial color. Everywhere there's a 1, we're going to basically say initial color. There we go. And then it looks like we have some edits in our alloc code. So we'll go ahead and change that as well to initial color everywhere. And then we'll update the code that sets the model so that it's setting initial color there as well. It looks like we missed naming the callback method. So let's go up there and rename that as well. There it is. And then Control-Shift-B and launch app on Flipper. Looks like we have a build error. This one is about the size is the wrong amount. That's because we changed it to a 32. So we'll change this to a L, and then we'll do capital X for hexadecimal. Control-Shift-B and launch app on Flipper. That time it worked. We'll set our initial color to cyan, which is 00FFFF. Okay, we forgot to put in those leading zeros. So let's go ahead and switch back to the code and add 06 in front of this LX. So we'll do %06LX, Control-Shift-B, launch app on Flipper. Okay, that compiled, and we have 6 zeros. Next, we'll go ahead and update our model so that we can hold the RGB colors. So instead of the X coordinate, we're going to change this to be a color array, and we'll have RGB, so we'll say 3 elements. Okay, and next we'll go ahead and add an index, so a uint8t of which color we're actually editing at the time when we use the left and right buttons. So this will be our selected RGB index into the color array, and 0 for red, 1 for green, and 2 for blue. Next, we'll scroll down to where we use the model. And we'll go ahead and just grab this code with the with model and paste it into our enter callback. And then we will grab this context assignment, remove that unused context, and there we go. And then instead of frequency, we'll go ahead and set models color at index 0 to 0, and color index 1, and color index 2. And then we'll also set our model's selected RGB index to 0. That's fine. And then next we'll update our draw callback so that we show the red value from our model color 0. And we'll change our X to be 14, our Y to be 24. And then we'll do green and blue. And we'll go ahead and do 0, 2 digits. And change the title as well. And then in our custom event callback, we have an error here because of X is no longer used. So we'll go ahead and just remove our access to the model. And then while we're here, we might as well move all the speaker code since we don't need to do anything with the speaker anymore. So let's go ahead and do that. That looks good. And then down in our input callback, when we press left arrow, instead of adjusting the X value of our model, we want to adjust our color at the model's selected RGB index. And if it's greater than 0, we'll go ahead and decrement the color. We'll go ahead and copy that code down for handling the right arrow key. And this time we'll say if it's less than FF, then we'll go ahead and increment the color. We'll remove these two comments about the left button clicked and the right button since they're no longer correct. And then we'll scroll down in our alloc and we'll update our model so that it sets the selected RGB index to 0 starting on the red color. And then Control-Shift-B, launch app on Flipper. And it looks like we got a compiler error this time. Since we're defining a variable, we need to enclose our case in curly braces. So we'll go ahead and put this inside curly braces. Control-Shift-B, launch app on Flipper again. That time it worked. And the right arrow is incrementing and the left arrow is decrementing. So next we're going to go down to our draw callback and we'll add a draw string to draw a little arrow sign in front of whichever item is currently selected. So that's 12 times our selected RGB index plus 24. And then we'll scroll down into our input handler and we'll add support for that up and down keys to change the selected index. So we'll go ahead and just copy this input key right code. And we'll switch it from key right to key up. And then here we just want to check if our RGB index is greater than 0. If it is, then we can decrement our RGB index. And then we'll add the same code, but if it's key down, and this time we'll say if it's less than 2, then go ahead and increment that index. Control-Shift-B, launch app on Flipper. Our down button is working, our right arrow is still working, our up is working, and there we go. So we're able to set all the values. Next, we want to be able to hold the button down to increment the value. So we'll add an OR check here for event type InputTypeRepeat. Control-Shift-B, launch app on Flipper. And this time we'll hold the right arrow key and we can see it increments. Perfect. Next, we'll scroll down into our enter callback and we'll modify our model. So instead of initializing it to all zeros when we enter the glow screen, we instead set it to the initial color of our red, green, and blue. So we're going to take that initial color value and we're going to shift it 16 bits over for the red, and then we'll mask it with the FF to extract those 8 bits. And then for green, it's the same thing, but only shifting by 8. And then for blue, it's shifting by 0, so we don't have to say any shift. And then we'll say red, green, and blue. Control-Shift-B, and then launch app on Flipper. And then this time we'll go into config and set our initial color to red. And we go into glow, there's our red. Let's go ahead and go back into config and we'll switch it to green. And our glow, there's our green. And then in config, we'll switch it to blue. And glow, there's our blue. If you've been paying attention, you'll realize that we haven't actually changed the color of the flipper's light yet. So let's go ahead and add a method here for RGB flipper set LED. And that will take our app as a parameter. And then it will also take our glow model as a parameter. And we'll use that to go ahead and switch the light on the flipper. Since our red, green, blue parameters are on the stack, I think we need to do message block instead of just message. Let me go to definition real quick. Yeah, and we can see in this message block, it does a wait and it does a flag free. So I think that's correct. Okay, so let's go ahead and copy our method name. So RGB flipper set LED, which takes an app and a model. And we'll go ahead and paste it in here in our enter callback. And we'll pass it our app and our model. So that's when we choose glow. But let's also handle that custom event callback of when we press the OK button. So instead of unused model here, we're going to go ahead and also set our LED using app and model. Okay, I think that should be good. So Control-Shift-B and launch app on Flipper. The LED light's kind of hard to see on the video, but let's go ahead and we'll configure our initial color to red. And we'll click on glow and it switched to red. And then I'm going to just add a bunch of green to it. And hopefully you'll be able to see the colors change. Next, we'll add a new setting that says whether or not we should keep the LED set to the same value when the app exits. So we'll call this a Boolean that's called setting LED on exit. Next, we'll scroll down to where our other setting is stored. Let's fix this comment. Our first setting is the initial LED color. So we'll go ahead and duplicate our setting code. And this time we'll say the second setting is for our LED on exit. And we'll change that to a Boolean, true, false. We'll change the values to yes and no. Change the method name, and then we'll set the on exit to the values. Then I'll go ahead and copy that method name to the clipboard, and we'll scroll down to our alloc code. I'll temporarily paste that method name in so we remember it, and then we'll copy our setting 1 code. And then instead of initial color, we want to be using LED on exit everywhere. And then this is our callback method. So we'll go ahead and copy that callback that we have down here. There we go. And then again, we'll change all of these entries to LED on exit. And then we'll scroll down and we'll set our models LED on exit to the exit values with our index. And then we'll scroll back up to our enter callback. And we'll grab the code that's in the enter callback and put it in the exit callback. And then we'll erase the code inside our with view model. And then we'll add a check to see if the LED on exit is not true, then we will reset the RGB light. The first time I wrote this code, I forgot to put that if block, so we always reset the light. And the second time I wrote this code, I forgot that not, so we were doing exactly not what I wanted it to do. But now it sets the light properly when you exit the app. Next, we'll scroll down to the About text, and we'll replace this as a sample application with the message that explains that this application sets the color of the internal LED on the flipper. You'd also want to change the author and the links. Control-Shift-B, launch app on flipper. And then we'll go down to About and make sure it has the right message. You may want to change the new lines to not wrap the text so quickly. So we're really close to being done here. We're going to take that App.PNG. I'm going to drop a new App.PNG and say replace. And then we'll just do a quick scan through the file and make sure all of our comments make sense, that we didn't miss anything. Here's one that's incorrect. Another fit and finish thing we can do is add a little message about the OK button. One last Control-Shift-B and launch app on flipper. Make sure we didn't break anything in those edits. If you made it to here, I really thank you for your time. Before I did any editing, it actually took 45 minutes to create the RGB flipper app from that skeleton app. But hopefully you can see how we can edit that skeleton app to be whatever application we want to make for the Flipper Zero. Please like, subscribe, and click on that notification bell to find out about future videos. Also, don't forget to join my Discord server for giveaways and to talk about what kind of future videos you'd like to see. Thanks a lot.